Half my shit is taken.
Get back.
A heavy metal drummer that blows out his hearing and goes to live in the land of the deaf. In this one introducing sentence, Sound of Metal is already a movie no one thought could ever be done in Hollywood, and at the same time such a good concept, it's crazy to think no one has ever done it before. The movie's idea came in 2007 from director Derek Cianfrance, who damaged his ears in his drumming days. At the time, Sound of Metal was supposed to be a docufiction, called Metalhead, but had to be put aside when Cianfrance was finally given a green light to direct a 12-year-old project, Blue Valentine, which is both a good and a bad thing. Bad because Blue Valentine was marketed as a Valentine's Day movie, which means my sorry soul went to the cinema fully expecting to watch a beautiful love story and ended up traumatized for life. But also, good, because Sound of Metal was passed on to Cianfrance's friend, Darius Martyr. And Martyr managed to not only do justice by the good concept in his directorial debut, he actually made it better. Since Martyr's grandmother was deaf and his brother is a musician, the director had a good insight into the movie's universe and realized the story could go so much deeper. This film is a wake-up. Most people think of deafness as a physical disability. We don't understand that it is in fact a culture.
Everybody here shares in the belief that being deaf is not a handicap, not something to fix.
So, along with his brother Abraham, Martyr wrote the script about Ruben, played by Riz Ahmed, a heavy metal drummer that has a band with his girlfriend, Lou, played by Olivia Cook, and while they're both touring America, the man finds himself suddenly out of hearing. The film is divided in 3 arcs: Ruben's initial shock and reaction to his sudden condition, his time spent in the deaf community, led by Paul Raci's Joe, and his attempts to go back to the life he had before he became deaf. The movie was no easy sell, and according to the director, the words heavy metal and deaf people were enough to finish any possible conversation with studios before it even began. In the end, the budget was approved and reported as a low 7 figures, which is way less than most movies nominated for an Oscar gets nowadays, but apparently just enough for Martyr to do the film exactly like he wanted. And we're all happier for that. The director decided to shoot chronologically, since it helped the actors go through the same journey as their characters. Especially Ahmed and Raci's relationship was supposed to be captured as it really happened, with both actors getting emotional by the time they had their last scene together. Another request from Martyr was that all versions of the movie would include open captions for dialogue, so that hearing and deaf audiences can have a similar experience when watching the movie. Considering Americans are known for their rejection of subtitles, you can imagine the choice was definitely a controversial one. Also, one of the biggest choices Martyr made was when it came to casting the deaf characters. In the past, most characters with any disability have been played by able-bodied actors, not to mention the general lack of deaf characters that are not there simply for laughs or as a quirky side character.
Oh, and you are? Your name is Shit Pizza?
Martyr was having none of that. Aside from Ruben, every single deaf character in the movie is played by an actor who is either deaf or from a deaf culture. Considering how demanding the character is, community leader Joe was a role that a lot of the financiers thought should be played by a name actor. But Paul Raci ended up being chosen since he was raised as the hearing son of deaf parents and is fluent in American Sign Language. He also fought in the Vietnam War, just like his character. One of the biggest lines in the movie, where Joe says, "I still remember the song that was playing when I lost my hearing," is actually something Raci's mother used to say.
I lost my hearing in the Vietnam War when a bomb exploded near me. I still remember the music I was listening to when that bomb went off.
There's a reason why Ruben was the exception, and that's because Martyr wanted the audience and actor to go through the same process during the movie, the one of being put into a world that's unfamiliar. The idea is that the audience will learn how it is to be deaf at the same time Ruben does. Riz Ahmed is brilliant at that. Actually, Riz Ahmed is brilliant in everything. The actor was put through an intense routine of learning sign language, learning the drums, going to several events within the deaf community, Alcoholics or Narcotics Anonymous meetings and gym training. And if that sounds tiring to you, let me just say it was really worth it. Ahmed's portraying of Ruben is so genuine and on point, you simply forget you are watching an actor by the middle of the movie and is just constantly nervous about the future of this cool guy you just met and really wish could have a good life. A very important person to mention here is Jeremy Lee Stone, who is also deaf and was recruited as a Meds ASL coach, but ended up having a much bigger role as a consultant for the movie. Apparently, the cast was so happy to take feedback from Stone, that Martyr would sometimes allow him to completely take over for him on set. Martyr said it himself that he relied a lot on Stone as a somewhat of a second director for the movie, and you can even see him on screen as Ruben's sign language teacher. Stone would make small changes, that were actually huge when it came to make the movie as realistic as possible. If the characters were staged too close together, Stone would make sure they were given enough space to sign. When deaf actors were scripted to look surprised as another person entered the frame, Stone explained that was basically impossible since deaf people will usually stand at an angle so they can see people coming and going. It comes to show how big of a difference it makes to have people who understand the subject being talked about on set, which is a statement that seems really obvious, but at the same time manages to be really rare in a lot of film productions. Now, a key element to the movie since the beginning of the production was obviously sound. Before the script was even finished, Martyr was already having meetings with sound designer Nicholas Becker, who comes from a long list of blockbuster movies such as Gravity and Arrival. The general idea was that they didn't want to just dip the volume whenever the audience was inside Ruben's head. So, instead of silence, Becker designed this complex sound that sometimes uses Ahmed's own voice recorded with a stethoscope and sensitive microphones to kind of simulate the sensation of being deaf. Also, Becker had this really cool idea to work on the film's score to turn the sound of Ruben's opening gig, the first music we hear in the movie, and the last clear thing Ruben does, into a distorted theme that we can hear later in the film. In that way, the audience also experiments the sound getting more and more distorted once Ruben starts losing his hearing. Which is what Becker describes as the sound of metal. And actually, according to editor Mikkel E.G. Nielsen, the movie title can also refer to the 3 acts of the movie. So the first part, with Ruben as a hearing person, would be the sound, then the transitional point of the character comes as the of, and finally once Ruben chooses to hear again via metallic sounds would be the metal.
Here we go.
Nielsen used the editing as a tool to make the audience experience Ruben's transition. We almost never know more than the main character does, and when we do it's basically in ways that makes Ruben's experience even more painful. Like in the pharmacist scene, where the editing goes in and out of dialogue, so you can actually understand how lost and confused Ruben feels during the whole process.
It's probably a 2 out of 10 in terms of his hearing. He's having trouble even communicating with me.
Even the open captions Martyr was so adamant about were used as a tool. It's there in the beginning of the movie, but it goes away once Ruben enters the sober house for the deaf, where everyone communicates through ASL. So the movie turns the table, for once the hearing audience gets to feel just as isolated as Ruben does, not able to understand what's being expressed, at the same time as people who know ASL would feel completely at ease watching the scene. According to the editor, it was unplanned, but Sound of Metal manages in its first and last scene to simply summarize the movie's entire plot with basic symmetry. The opening scene shows a restless Ruben, almost angrily playing his drums, while the final scene focuses on him sitting outside, looking at peace, immersed in complete silence. And we, as the audience, feel that too. It's no surprise that Sound of Metal landed 6 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Ahmed, Best Supporting Actor for Rachi, Best Editing and Best Sound. Be it for the amazing acting, immersive elements, or simply for its respectful representation of the deaf community, the film is not only a learning experience for everyone, but also, simply put, impressive.